Hey all, Mike Eccles back. And another week. All right, we've done this 2 weeks now, and it seems like we're going to be moving right along. Lots and lots of specific purpose statements I received. Very happy to see that. It seems like almost all of you are going to ride right through to the end of the semester, which is a smart move. And I'm glad that you guys are here. All right. A lot of great speech topics. All right. Just some of you had to rewrite your specific purpose statements, people. Please follow the guidelines from the sample outlines I provided you last week. Okay. You've got two speeches of conviction and you have two speeches of actuation. Take a look how they wrote their statements. That's what I'm looking for. All right. Got to make sure they're persuasive. Now, somebody asked me this the other day, and I've already looked at one already. I'm not going to have you have your outline done by this Monday. And again, I'm picking Monday because even though we're doing the whole quarantine thing, I know that there are families that will be celebrating Easter this coming Sunday. So your assignment won't be due until Monday, April 13th at 2 p.m. Now, I'm not going to have you hand your speech outline into me until you attach it to your speech. I'm not going to worry about it yet. But if you would like to send me your outline for me to take a look at, absolutely, I have no problem doing that. All right. Now, as you've noticed from the samples that I gave you, and one of the things that I talked about last time is the speech is pretty much the same. It's designed very much the same. You've got a attention gainer and a preview in your introduction. You're going to have 2 or 3 main points. Now, the samples might have more main points, but I have shortened your speech to 3 to 5 minutes. Okay. So 2 or 3 main points. And again, those are going to be the reasons why we should agree with you or the reasons why we should take the action you want us to take. And then, of course, a conclusion with a review and some form of closure. Now, pretty much everything's going to be the same. One of the little differences might be the fact that you can now, in your persuasive speech, relay a personal experience. Okay, and I will tell you that a lot of students like to do that in their attention gainer. Now, you can put it anywhere you want, but they like to put it in their attention gainer. Oh, by the way, just to let you know, I know it's in your course outline. You may not have looked at it in a while, but I will go ahead and reaffirm it now. A visual aid is not necessary for the speech. Okay. As a matter of fact, it might be almost impossible. I mean, sure, you can attach a couple of pictures, and you can if you want, but it's not going to be something that is going to be required. It was only going to be voluntary if we were still face to face, but now, I'm not even worried about it. But sure, relating a personal experience, a lot of students like to do that in the attention gainer. Okay. But there's something else that's going to be slightly different than the informative speech. See, remember, with the informative speech, what your goal was is to educate, to inform and or educate the audience on something they may not have known before. Okay, to inform and or educate. But now you're looking to influence the opinion, attitude, and or behavior of your audience. You're trying to get people to think the way you do, feel the way you do, share the same opinion or idea, or actually get people to do something you want them to do. So now there's one thing that you're going to need, and that's a believability in the eyes of your audience that who you are and what you're saying is true, is right, is correct. And when you establish a believability in the eyes of your audience that who you are and what you're saying is true, right, and or correct, you then have established credibility. Okay? Establishing credibility is so important in being able to have a very successful persuasive speech. Now, when you look at the different types of credibility, they start on page 390 of your textbook. All right. Now, the first type is establishing credibility based on competence. Now, the 3 key terms that go with this is wisdom, authority, and or knowledge that someone demonstrates about that topic. Okay. Someone who just comes across as being very smart or very intelligent. Some people will have established credibility even before they speak. Some can actually establish credibility during their speech. All right. But when you have someone who demonstrates competent credibility, It's the wisdom, authority, and or knowledge they demonstrate. I'll give you a great example. And I'll stay away from like public speeches just for a moment. But when you talk about being influenced by people, we're all influenced to do everything. Okay? Nobody is not influenced. All right? For example, you're all sitting in front of this camera right now, watching this silly gray-haired guy who at 54 is silly enough to have a 3-year-old daughter, okay, that he's running chasing around all day long. Yet somewhere along the line, somebody spoke with you, and they said to you about how important it is to get your education. And when you looked at that person and you listened to them, you looked at them with some kind of credibility, with like a competent credibility. Now, for me, that's easy. It was my dad. Okay. My dad would always tell me how important it was to get your education. Now, was it because my dad is also a college professor and has a PhD? No, it's actually the opposite. My dad dropped out of Dickinson High School in Jersey City when he was 16 years old, and he never went back to get his high school diploma. Never got his equivalency. So as the years went on, and my dad became very successful in his field. He had a great reputation in the trucking industry. Worked for a couple of great trucking companies, retired from New Penn Trucking, which is based over in South Kearney. And he had a great reputation. The only problem is that he would always stay here because he had no education. While others who were younger and who had more education would rise, but he would always stay here because he just didn't have the educational background. Okay? So when he would tell me about the importance of education, you need to stay in school, you need to go to college, you need to get your degree, I always looked at him with wisdom, authority, and knowledge, that he knew what he was talking about. Not because he had a PhD, but because he knew what it was like to not have that. And that's why I've been a professor at Bergen for 21 years. I've had my advanced degrees, my graduate degrees for a long time. It's because of my dad. So that's establishing competent credibility. Now, the next type they talk about in your chapter is establishing credibility based on character. Just simply who you are. And honesty, reputation are the two key terms that can go with establishing credibility based on character. Okay. For example, a lot of times when you are influenced, say, you're watching a TV commercial and some celebrity spokesperson comes on. Well, the reason why that person was hired as a celebrity spokesperson is because of their character. That people will say, well, if that person say this product's good, it must be good, and you go ahead and buy it. Now, it might not always be the same, the right thing, but I'll give you a great example. And this happened in New York City many, many years ago. Now, this is going to be for much more probably easy for some of the old timers to understand, but there was a guy, there was a bank that was ready to open up. It was called Bowery Bank, and they wanted to compete against the other big banks in New York City, Chase and Chemical and that kind of thing. And they wanted to make a big splash in New York City, and they didn't know how to do it. So they decided to hire a celebrity spokesperson. You mean this guy? Well, yeah, why not? Nobody else has hired him. But, oh my God, if this guy will do this for us, everybody will believe him. So sure enough, one day, on radio ads, TV ads, newspaper ads, magazines all across the tri-state area, you suddenly saw, hi folks, I'm Joe DiMaggio. And if you want the best return on your investment, go think Bowery Bank. And sure enough, people all over the New York City area were dumping, withdrawing money from their bank accounts and going over to Bowery Bank. And they'd go to Chase Manhattan and say, I'd like to close my account. Why? I'm going to go over to Bowery Bank. Well, why are you doing that? Well, because Joe D says so. And of course, it's because it's Joe DiMaggio. Okay, not only one of the greatest ball players of all time, one of the great heroes of this area, but because he was known for being so, such a gentleman off the field, so graceful and dignified that, well, if Joe D says go to Bowery Bank, that's what I'm doing. So that's establishing credibility based on character. Now, the final one on page 392 is establishing credibility based on charisma, someone who's charismatic. Okay. Now, the key terms that go with charismatic or charisma is enthusiastic, sincere, concerned. These are the type of words that will come across with someone who is a charismatic speaker or with charisma. Okay, but especially enthusiastic, sincere, um, and sometimes that you take the word charisma and you take out the I, the S, and the last A, and you get the word charm. And that helps a lot too. Now, I'll give you an example of someone who influenced me big time based on charisma. I'm 54 years old now, and I'm a little older, but you could probably tell that my body used to look a different way. And even if you go to one of my videos on my YouTube channel, you'll see that on my 50th birthday, I was still bench pressing some heavy weight. And when I put the weights down and I stand up, you could see, my chest and my shoulders were a really good size. Well, I had done that for many years. Well, there's a reason why I had lifted all those weights all those years. It was because in 1978, not long after my family got cable TV and I had HBO, I was 13 years old and I turned on HBO one day and there was a movie that was now on HBO. It had come out in movie theaters the year before, in 1977. And it was a movie called Pumping Iron. Now, bodybuilding was something I started to take a little interest in, but there was something about this film, especially the star of the movie. See, the star of the movie, what it was about it was a real life documentary about the bodybuilding world. And the movie centered around a guy who had been Mr. Universe for 5 straight years and was now competing in his last Mr. Universe because he was going to retire. And he was 28 years old, and he was the cockiest son of a bitch I'd ever seen in my life. I'd never seen anybody so self-centered and so assured of themselves, and I just really fell for this guy. I was like, wow, this guy is so cool. Now, I couldn't really pronounce his last name. It was like Schwarzenegger, I don't know. All I needed to remember was his first name, and that, of course, was Arnold. And sure enough, Arnold Schwarzenegger was a huge influence on me. And he influenced me to get into, I made my father buy me a bench, buy me some weights. I started, a year later, I was a freshman in high school, immediately was in the weight room after school, especially after football season was over. And even up until, like you see, that was 13, 14 years old. You look at me at that YouTube video, that's 50 years old, and I'm still putting up weight like that. Why? Because of Arnold. All right? So this is what I want you to do, is I want you to read over those 3. Page 390 to 392. The 3 type of credibilities: competence, character, and charisma. And what I want you to do is I want you to tell me, give me one person for each of those 3. Someone who has influenced you based on competence, someone who has influenced you based on charisma, someone who's influenced you based on character. All right? Have a great week, and we'll see you next week.